How's it going out there, YouTube? My name is Jesse, and I am the curator for the Golden Age, and this is another episode of
Lost Heroes of the... Are you sure you want to do this?
What do you mean?
Are you sure this is a hero you want to cover?
I did a whole video about it. I thought maybe we would go ahead and cover it.
This could be a hot-button issue.
I don't think it's going to be as bad as you think it is.
I'm going to step away from this one. I am not going to touch it.
Okay, I'll cover it myself then. Welcome back to another episode of Lost Heroes of the Golden Age. Now, this could be a touchy subject to approach. In comic books, there is sometimes a problem with being culturally sensitive. If you don't do it enough, then people think that you're excluding a group or that you're being racially insensitive. And if you do it too much, then it looks like you're pandering, which can sometimes be just as insensitive. In the golden age of comic books, this was about as bad as it can be. When depicting other races, the comic book landscape wasn't exactly sensitive. If you think about the Indians, they were either portrayed as red or dark-skinned. Chinese and also Japanese, anybody who was at least from the Asian descent was colored as having yellow skin. Anybody who was Arabic was projected as being people that came from the sands and wore towels on their heads and carried scimitars. And black people in general were either depicted as being a villain or being African. And in the rare cases where they weren't either of those and associated with the hero in some way, they were depicted as very culturally insensitive. And just see Ebony White from the Spirit comics to get a good idea of what I mean. So, with the fact that other people besides white people were depicted very poorly in comic books back then, you can imagine my surprise when I came across this comic, and I decided that we would go ahead and do a review of the featured story of this comic. Now, it is a comic book for African Americans, written by African Americans, starring African Americans, which in the Golden Age and the 1940s, it wasn't done. All your lead characters were white. Just read any section of Golden Age comic books and you'll see that. Now, mostly they were white males. There were some white females that were lead stories, but they were always white people. So finding a lead feature of a black hero was actually something that I didn't think existed in the 40s. But I did find it, and I decided to go ahead and cover it. So let's go over this issue where we're going to cover Ace Harlem. Now, coming in on this episode is Ace Harlem. Ace Harlem's real name was Ace Harlem. Now, keep in mind, I'm saying the name of the comic book and the publisher. This is what they are. This was All Negro Comics #1 in 1947. The original publisher was All Negro Comics Incorporated, created by John Terrell. I'd say the most interesting thing about this is that the lead protagonist is actually black, and that was not only was it unusual for 1947, I don't think it was ever done in 1947. There wasn't a lot of racial sensitivity back then in the 40s. Black men were either portrayed as a criminal or Africans. Chinese people were portrayed as being yellow. There was no cultural sensitivity back in the 40s. We even in the 60s, there wasn't really that much cultural sensitivity. Just look at all the heroes that existed back there that weren't black. So this made this very unusual. Not only was this comic created by and exclusively only having black characters in this story, it was that they were the protagonists and they weren't portrayed in a negative light in this. Now, the creation of this was such an unusual thing in the 1947 that Time magazine even wrote an article about this. That is how much of an unusual thing this was. Now, here are a couple of quotes from the Time magazine article. This is not my quotes, this is actually their quotes. All Negro Comics is the first to be drawn by Negro artists and the people entirely by Negro characters. They also said that in the lead feature, Ace Harlem, that the villains were a couple of zoot-suit, jive-talking Negro muggers whose presence in anyone else's comic books might have brought up complaints of racial distortion. Since it was all in the family, Evans thought no Negro readers would mind. And yeah, if anything like this was brought up even today, there would be major protests about the just total racial insensitivity that was going on in the comic books. But the creator thought that since he was black and all the characters were black, that none of the readers would find this culturally insensitive. I don't know how something like that would go over today, though. We open up our story with the name splashed across the top, Ace Harlem. Now it says, early morning in Pop's barbecue shack. These two guys with trench coats and sunglasses pop in, looking very nonchalant. They walk over to the corner where the jukebox is, and the guy in yellow says, "When you lay the cold steel on him, I'll drape the chain, dig me?" They start playing the song "Open the Door, Richard," which is an interesting song. Pop starts asking them what they would like to order, and then the one in green pulls out the gun while the one in yellow drapes the chain on his back after the green tells him to turn around. He chokes him out, leaves him for dead, and takes the money. They start to dart out the store very quickly, and as they're reaching the door, a young lady walks in. They push her out of the way. A piece of one of the chains snaps, and she notices the guy, I guess his name is Pop, lying dead on the counter, and she calls the police. And then we have a thing in the corner. Ace Harlem, famed Negro detective, arrives. He takes in everything at a glance. And this guy walks in, and he's apparently Ace Harlem. A doctor is already dead, and he said that he was strangled and looks like a holdup. And the detective wants everyone to keep everything as it is and doesn't want them to touch everything. He even instructs the young lady who is reaching for her effects to leave them on the floor. He says that he was strangled and he's never seen anything like it due to the marks that's on his neck. And then he talks to the girl and asks her what happened, and she's like, "I'm not quite sure. When I stepped in, whammo." She said that she saw two zoot suiters. I think that's a phrase that I'm unfamiliar with. This was the 1940s. She mentioned they were playing the song "Open the Door, Richard," and the detective says, "Smart girl, maybe we got a clue." From the jukebox, he was able to take a fingerprint, and he talks to the detective that he wants, call headquarters for a fingerprint expert. He wants to get the fingerprint analyzed. She asks him what happened, and she says when she got knocked down, one of them caught his zoot chain. Ace, puzzled, takes another look at Pop's necks. This is certainly a new one on me. So he rolls it around in his head, and then he realizes that it's the Zoot Chain Killers. Now, he helps the lady back with her belongings and notices a charm on the floor and asks if it belongs to her. She says she's never seen it before, and he says that she can go, but to be around for questioning. He takes the chain and the fingerprint back to the lab. Well, he gets the fingerprint analyzed, and the tech tells him that the fingerprints are not on file. So he takes the charm to a local shop that would sell such effects, and he gets a little aggressive with the shop owner, who finally tells him that this charm was bought by someone from, Jackson's boarding house, and that he paid with a $2 bill. And then the detectives say, Jackson always puts his lucky number on unlucky money. Come on, Lucky Charm, work for me. Now, I can attest that a $2 bill is very unlucky. Now we cut back to what we have identified as the Zoot Chain Killers. They get back to their hideout, and they start going over the money when one of them notices that the chain is missing. Now, he refers to the one that holds the chain. He's being referred to as Lizard. But I don't think we get a name for the other guy. He notices that the chain is missing, and the other one gets scared and wants to run off, and Lizard's afraid that he'll go to the police. So Lizard actually strangles this guy with the chain and says, dead man tell no tales, and I can use all the money myself. And as he starts talking to himself, he says he's better off working alone anyways, and hold it, police car down there looks like. Now, Ace Harlem comes up to the building and notices one of the shades is drawn in the building and says, it's unusual for shades to be drawn at this time of day. So Lizard hides out and is expecting to get the drop on the detective, and I guess the hallway is dark because he's walking with a flashlight. Lizard leaps towards the detective and he blinds him with the flashlight, dodges out of the way as the man Lizard, as we know him, comes in for another rush at the detective. He sidesteps the charge, and Lizard breaks through the railing, and as he is falling, the chain gets wrapped around his neck, grabs a protruding beam, and he ends up hanging himself. And one of the detectives, and I love this line, he says, hate to see the electric chair cheated this way. And Ace says, never saw a case solve itself so quickly before. These two took care of themselves. I know it sounds like old stuff to you, but I never heard of a crime yet that ever gained anybody any good. And they say to look for Ace Harlem in the next issue of the comic. And I do think this was meant to go on as a continuing series, even though it only went on for the one issue, because even at the very end, there is a shout out to the next issue. This is the very last page of the comic. It says, remember, crime doesn't pay. Stick to the church and use up your energy in good, clean sports. Be sure to follow the picture, story, and color of Negro trailblazers and champions in the sports world beginning in the next issue of All Negro Comics. Now, I think they very much intended this to be a continuing series, but we only got one issue. Now, I know Ace Harlem is a detective, not exactly a hero, and he is not the earliest depiction of a black character leading a comic book story that I actually found. And if you're interested in that, you can leave me a comment in the comment section and we can do a cover of that, which had an interesting twist in it. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope this doesn't turn into too much of a hot button topic. And until next time, I'll be seeing you.